This podcast interview is long overdue. Frankly, it's so overdue that I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed about it, to be honest. So, what do we do when we're embarrassed and sharing that feeling with the World Wide Web? Well, I guess in my case, I double down. I mean, if I'm feeling awkward already, why not just dig a little bit deeper, shall we? I'm half joking, but also painfully serious, because I have a request. And it's a request I don't like to make even if I do talk all about business and marketing and sales all the time. But I especially don't like to make the request right at the start of an episode. However, the realities of hosting and running this podcast are real, and I need your help. Just like your friendly local public radio station, it's time for a membership drive. I know, they're a little bit miserable, but I promise this one does not involve a mass-produced mug, obviously, or yet another canvas tote bag that we probably all don't need. No, this is far more simple. You can simply click on over to makersplaybook.com/podcast-support, which of course is also in the show notes, and hopefully make whatever one-time financial contribution you feel comfortable with. Or if you feel that the podcast gives you at least $4 worth of value on any given episode, then there is a membership drive swag option. Because if I'm going to liken this to a public radio membership drive, there at least has to be some kind of swag, right? I'm pretty sure those are the rules. While we don't have physical swag like t-shirts or stickers just yet, which, by the way, if you're interested, send me a message and let me know. I am curious about that. The point, I figured, what better podcast swag is there than to find out who I'm interviewing before I interview them, and also have the opportunity to ask your own questions to any one of those guests. So once you click makersplaybook.com/podcast-support, you'll see there is a sustaining subscription option for $12 a month, which is equal to $4 per episode. With this, you'll have the opportunity to find out who I'm interviewing in advance and ask your own questions of those guests. Or more accurately, write those questions for those guests that I will then ask out loud. You don't have to worry about having your voice on the internet. You've heard these before, actually, on past episodes. Additionally, you'll also gain access to the ever-growing archive of my monthly photo tips, which are 2 years and running. There is a lot of information in there. So one more time, that's makersplaybook.com/podcast-support. Thank you so much in advance, my maker friends. Now let's get on with this week's chat with the one, the only, the Aliveguy himself, Mr. Bill Schwenzer. I don't know of a more supportive person on the internet, and I am thrilled to be finally shining a light on his story, as he has shown a light on so many of the rest of us in supporting all of our endeavors. So, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikis Kara. A long overdue, an embarrassingly long overdue official. Hey, Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm actually very, very happy to be here.
I'm thrilled. I'm going to just let you introduce yourself right away, because otherwise I'm just going to start rambling on about, well, I am going to read out loud many of the wonderful things people have said about you, because that just needs to be on the record. But first, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Bill Schwenzer, originally from Long Island, New York. Born and raised, made my way to Florida kind of indirectly. I went out to California a number of years, but made my way to Florida, and now Central Florida is my new home. So here's where I reside. My studio is in my lanai, they call it in Florida, which is basically a Florida room. And it's just one passageway where I kind of funnel my way through to get to where I need. I've been doing pottery probably 30 years. I haven't really focused on it for 30 years. I think I first touched clay in the early 90s. It was kind of by accident. I was helping someone out fix a kick wheel. Was just graduated from engineering school at University of Buffalo. Went and got my first big time engineering design. I ended up being a sales job. So I was in technical sales. And I was in California, and I had a friend that was taking a pottery class and was like, hey, I have found this kick wheel. You're an engineer. You could probably figure out how to fix this thing. It was kind of like, if I could get this working, I'll have a wheel and whatever. So I applied my skills to that. And before you know it, I was playing with it. And the person's like, well, geez, you have like a natural knack for that. And I've always had artistic background. So for me, I really wanted to be an artist from day one, kind of in school, but I went kind of through what I think a lot of people go through. Having parents that my dad was a laborer, he was a plumber. I used his hands. And one of the things I could always remember him saying is, when you grow up, son, use your brain and not your hands. You'll thank me later. There are times when now I look back and say, well, okay, I kind of wouldn't have made it to where I'm at if I really didn't have the ability to learn the engineering, learn all those crazy skills that I'm applying really now. I'm so thankful for the education, the ability to test your brain at a high level. You don't always have to have a degree in something to apply it. I mean, now I'm doing pottery, so I don't have a degree in pottery, but I have the ability to test my mind to a level and use it appropriately. So that's a little bit about me. I mean, I'm kind of diverse in a couple different areas. Problem solving is like one of my favorite things. Spent a ton of time in my corporate world. When I did engineering, I kind of cycled back. My first job was in California, so I got to really enjoy California living. I mean, my first real thing was here I am hanging out in San Francisco Bay Area, just watching the Grateful Dead on stage back in the day, and some wild and crazy stuff.
Is that where Aliveguy came from?
No, actually, okay, I'll tell you the Aliveguy story. The Aliveguy story is a fun story,
Because
really.
people maybe heard your name and are like, well, who's Bill Schwenzer? And I'm like,
Right.
as soon as we say Aliveguy Pottery, I think they're going to be like,
Yeah, the Aliveguy thing is an influence from Pearl Jam, the band. The Seattle sound at the time, early 90s, was the Seattle sound. I was at a transition in my life where I kind of was between jobs, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to, be full-time in sales, and I was in the grind, and I was kind of in a transitionary point in my life. And I finally started listening to some music, and it really, I'm really into the arts and dancing and music. It really impacts my life, I found over time. I rely on it a lot for motivation and stuff, but where the Aliveguy came from was Pearl Jam has a little stick figure. It's kind of like my logo. I changed it a little bit, so I don't think it's copyright issues, but oh well, they are such a free giving group. That was one of the reasons why I love them so much, because they would allow you to record their music live and all this other stuff. And so it was kind of the breadth of what they delivered as a band, what the commitment they delivered to their fans, their people, the people that were around them, to kind of give back something over time. The Stickman was kind of like the Aliveguy. They have a song Alive. So I created the Aliveguy as a homage to the musical influence and just the whole branding of giving back and always being a free spirit of just kind of being altruistic and being open breaths about that. So that it kind of stuck for quite a while, and I like it. I love it. I like being recognized both ways. Sometimes people forget, but I don't mind being recognized as the Aliveguy.
you are the alive human. The way you just described Pearl Jam's ethos, I was like, oh, this sounds precisely as how I would describe you as a person. And
Yeah.
how I know many people in the community, on the internet, that's the description, bar none, across the board, the way everybody describes you, which is just fabulous and wonderful. And this is how this whole episode is going to sound. It's just me being like, Bill is the original hype guy for all of us. We can change Aliveguy to hype guy.
Yeah, well, a hype guy in the most positive way. I actually started looking up what hype actually means, and it can have a negative connotation. Because when people started calling me the hype guy, I'm like, well, I take it positively.
Hmm.
But is it sometimes like when you throw it a certain way, could it be maybe where hype, when you're hyping, you could hype too much? There's really a happy balance there, right?
I have never clearly, I need to look up the definition. I have never thought of it that way. I've only thought of it in a positive of like, you are rooting for us all, in it. Sometimes I will say more than yourself sometimes, where then all of us are like, wait, hold on a second, Bill. Like, you also need this as much as the rest of us.
Oh, I would agree with you there. I definitely would agree with you there. I sometimes lean on recognizing the good in others to see the good in myself. So I think that's really important to have people tell you certain things. I mean, I don't, growing up, I think I really lacked a lot of that. I think I was exposed to sisters that really, and my mom was really more of a tough love type of situation. You had to like really accomplish something, immense, like when I graduated from engineering school, that was like, oh my goodness, that was like kind of the highlight of my life and being proud of me. But then as time went on, I had older parents. So my dad died in the early 90s. So I lost him. And then my mom, as she got older, she got caught in just, I'm surviving type of mode. And so I kind of lacked some of that. So I started, the art really brought a lot of that. When I started creating and making things and people seeing me apply my mechanical motor skills as well as incorporating like my engineering mind to process, to solving issues, to, really doing things with intention and, becoming a very lean mover and lean operator was something I learned in engineering and process and manufacturing. And to use that now and to see people recognize that as that's more of my brand than what I'm making actually. How I go about attacking a process or making of a product, being real precise with what I'm doing.
Well, that's been the interesting side of a lot of the conversations we've had and in the community in terms of you come at things from a completely different perspective than a lot of other artists or, this is kind of the beautiful blend about having a group of people come together because you have one side of the spectrum coming at things from a very loose, free flowing way. And then we have you, you maybe are even more than I am when it comes to like, let me track this data and find this, find this system and make sure you have much more of a data mind even than I do, even though I'm comfortable on the, you have Yvonne and I are talking about spreadsheets all the time, but then you're like adding all the formulas into the spreadsheet.
There's a little bit of misnomer there. Let me give you some insight on that because
All right.
for many, many years I was super spreadsheet driven, like crazy, statistics and letting data drive your decision. It was system based where you look for feedback, you look for things that'll tell you, and data will tell you certain things. But you can get lost in data, as you know, and you could spend time tracking things that are unnecessary and not having a purpose. Am I really going to go back to this later? Is it very useful for me to even collect it? And over time, with my engineering and being in corporate business, I found that a lot of times you end up collecting information that really ends up becoming not applicable. Now, yeah, you may rule it out later, but you start overloading with too much and you lose your focus. So I backed off a lot of the real spreadsheeting, logging, and for a long, long time, I was running all my schedules on my kiln firings, exactly how much time it took, what it point at which temperature it hits the peak. And I'm saying, this thing's run by a computer. So what am I checking a computer? Do I really need to check whether the computer's working? And yeah, you have to. I mean, software is validated at a certain point when people develop it, but you want to let the experts do things. Just like I let the computer do certain portions, I let the programmer do things. One of the best saviors in my life was let the experts do their thing. And it's okay to question an expert. It's okay to question someone who's been doing it longer than you, appearing better than you, and understanding what they've done. But to constantly like say I have to come up with it myself, that I think was a fallacy in some areas where you burn time that you could spend it somewhere else. So I rather be in that mode of creating pots that really excite me and carry my artistic journey mentally and being in a good, strong mental state versus doing all of the lug work, all the grunt stuff and all of the nonsense. That's why I'm still dragging my feet with some of my website stuff and my newsletter and all these other things are, do I hire someone? Do I not? I'm going to do it because I can do it. I know I can. It's just being disciplined in the other areas now, again, going back to that.
I think what you just said also about not getting too lost in the data is especially true and important for those of us trying to do this by ourselves, because there's only so much you can do. When I talk to Allie about strategy, for example, the level of data she's going into for someone who's hired her, that's her job, that's her focus, is completely different than the level of data I'm going to keep track of on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis because there's not endless amounts of time for us, right? We have to kind of pick what's actually going to move the needle and where am I going to spend my time? Because otherwise, I mean, any one given subject of making, let alone the business side of things, will take your whole life.
Yeah, what's going to cause you to take the action? So, like with a car, right? You're driving down the road, you hear a big clanking or squealing of something. You're going to pull over. Okay, you got to take some action. But at what point do you say, okay, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to bring my car in every 3 months to have a checkup, to have oil done, to have a million different things? Yeah, you need the routine wear items. You need the bait changing your elements in a kiln, upkeep of certain things. But the getting crazy of going overboard with too many constraints for yourself sometimes could set yourself up for, I don't want to say failure, but when you become a decent problem solver, you can solve things when you start seeing signals that are indicators, like red flags will start popping up. Okay, my time was off, the kill under fired, or there's a little flag that'll say, okay, I need to learn something from this. I don't need to throw my arms up and cry. It's okay to put a post saying, ooh, boo-hoo, I had a bad firing. But to get so slammed up in, what problems can bring you, being a quality manager, I spent probably the last part of my career as a quality manager. And the quality manager role was very interesting to me because it allowed me to understand a little bit more about not so much that you're searching for the best quality, you're searching for meaning and intended use. The intended use thing is an interesting thought process because if you're designing something for something that's never intended, there's no need for it. That's not high quality. Like if you're looking to design a bulletproof vehicle and you're never going to expose it to that kind of terrain or environment or bullets, what are you doing? Yeah, okay, it could be the greatest looking thing. It could be impenetrable. You could have a process when you develop your processes for pottery that are super, super strong, can never fail. But are you ever going to test it to that point? Is there a need for that? So when I see people making pots and they're doing things, like certain portions of vitrification and getting the percentage down so low, are people actually misusing their pottery enough to where you're worried about something that's a little over 1% absorption rate, maybe 2%? People typically are people who own pottery are more than not clean. They're going to clean their stuff well. And I'm not saying, hey, let's make pots that are not fully vitrified, but to be hung up on achieving something that may not necessarily be an intended need. And that kind of changed. So when I got into quality, it was interesting to see how you could build systems and processes around things that will deliver you what your intentions are, not so much what somebody else's ideals are and what is supposed to be done. And if you don't get there, you solve the problem. You lay things out and you become a decent problem solver in the meantime.
This reminds me a lot of the conversation we had around picking website hosts because everybody on the planet has probably heard of Shopify. They've heard what an amazing platform Shopify is, that it's the top e-commerce site, yada, 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 which those things can be true. But then when you get into the weeds of actually what do we as small makers need? I think we lump ourselves in e-commerce because we're saying, oh, we're selling something on the internet. But the conversations you and I have had and with our other community members around like, what features and all of this stuff are you going to actually use? To where, are you overpaying for a platform because the internet said it was the best one, when in reality, we're not doing all the bells and whistles and all the stuff because our scope of our work as small business makers is just not we don't have the capacity to do all of those things, even for myself. And so we jump shipped.
One of the things that got me recently about functionality and intention was the idea of a soap dish. So people design these soap dishes, right, with elevated things and with holes that the water's going to drain into the hole and drain out. Well, if you look at how much of the surface that's going to then be in contact with that soapy stuff that's going to dry on there, to now clean that soap dish, if you're someone that likes to keep things relatively clean, you got a design now that's got all these crevices in it that you're going to have to clean out. Recently, I just took a small tray, round, flat tray that's going to just hold the bar of soap, put it next to my sink. And for me, yeah, okay, it does build up a little film. It'll grab the bar when you put it back on. And in a couple of days, all you do is bring it under the hot water. In 2 seconds, it's clean. So for the functionality of that particular design, it doesn't meet the, oh, it's got holes, and in everybody's mind you need a soap dish with holes that drains water. The real intention here is having something that holds your soap that doesn't get the yucky soap everywhere. And yeah, some people use oil of Olay soap or Dove soap that kind of foams and softens more. I like Dial because it doesn't go everywhere. So I do incorporate a type of soap that's conducive to the new soap dish I have. But it's those type of solutions that just kind of relate to a different way of looking at things. Like, why do you need a hand? Like, people are big on putting feet on the bottom of platters and stuff. And okay, you want to raise it up. It lifts the piece. It makes it, the appearance and aesthetic is good. I do like that. But there's often times where I don't want a foot. I don't want to add the extra, okay, now I got to worry about a crack or a fussiness, or maybe I don't like the way the foot looks and am I trying to please someone else? So I sometimes think about those things and the intention as to where am I going with this, you know?
This reminds me of I got really into making bowls with feet for a while. And when I put that in the dishwasher, water always catches because I was making pretty deep feet. And so water gets stuck in there. And so then when you forget about it, you flip it upside down and now you've spilled water either, on your pants or on another otherwise dry pot, all of this stuff that when Francesco was kind of creating the Cara Terra style, I was like, I like bowls with feet. I want feet. And he was like, no, absolutely not. It's not efficient for production, all of the reasons that you just said. So then it becomes the challenge of creating the shape that still lifts up off the table without the foot, which I think we're getting closer and closer to achieving. But now my realization of like, oh, it's so much easier to take this thing out of the dishwasher because there's no water.
Oh, yeah. That's a direct thing where you really have to think about what it's being and the attention behind it. That is so important. I think a lot of people forget about that. They're looking for sometimes the quick aesthetic and the pretty, maybe just the general appearance to maybe get a purchase. But I'm more about the functionality of whether it's really going to serve for something versus being, I'm going to flood the market with, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm thinking wrong that way and causing myself some havoc and not making the money I need to. But I'd rather not sell something that doesn't have intention than to do that. I'm not a used car salesman where I'm going to tell you about a need you don't have.
Yeah. Yep. And it's also, in many ways, the things we've heard, at least at markets, when people come into your booth and say, oh, you should make this, you should make this. It's all, to me, it's a lot of novelty, and novelty can have its place, right? I can think of some incredible potters who make very novel things, like Kate's mini malm burners. They're novel. They're amazing and adorable and fantastic. They're a novel thing, but that's novel on a different way to me than the example I thought of. Soap dishes for you are what bacon makers are for me.
Right. They needed to do something right.
Because number one, they're just complicated. It's like making a teapot without the benefit of a teapot because there's spouts and handles and all this stuff. But if you really want to cook bacon in the microwave, which I'm morally opposed to in general, I offered somebody like, okay, we don't have a bacon maker, but we have this small plate and this tumbler. So you put the cup on top of the plate. And when you're not making bacon, you have a cup and a plate, and they're easy to go in the dishwasher, much like you're talking about the soap dish. It's like, okay, now it's easier to clean, it's easier to use, but nope, that did not work for the person because they wanted this thing for this one purpose, which just makes me laugh because it's just like, it doesn't work as well in my mind.
Garlic graters are a big thing right now. And so I was kind of drawn to, okay, I need to look at this because I needed to make a couple pieces. So I wanted to make the ones with the concentric circles. I just put a rib in there and I tried it, and a couple people were like, really, how well does it work? And so I tested it, and okay, yeah, it works, but different ones work differently. And the ones with the circles, when you do rub against it, it kind of pushes the garlic around. The other thing is you're getting garlic all over yourself. So, you need to put a fork in it. You need to probably have one of those little potato holders that you have for those those burner slicers that when we were seeing all those demos at the flea market when we were growing up. So maybe you need just a little piece of clay that has a gripper on it or a couple things that will hold the garlic. So now we're getting into this whole thing of, you're selling it on concept of, and they're cool. I love them. I mean, I sold a bunch of them recently. I use one, but that's another thing where you start to think about what the real purpose is and what you're trying to do.
I'm laughing so hard because I want anybody who meets Francesco in person to just say the word garlic grater in front of him, and I'm gonna sit back and enjoy the reaction.
That'll probably explode, right? Because it's so against tradition.
He is if I'm morally opposed to bacon makers, he is morally opposed to garlic graters. I'm sorry, everybody. If you love to make them, there's nothing wrong with it. If you're enjoying it, if it's your thing, it's great. For him, absolutely not.
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. I personally probably won't make many anymore as they move forward, but I wanted to try it. That's the fun thing about pottery too, is to explore things that you may not necessarily think that you want to mess with. Like for years, I was never into color. I was never into like crazy bold colors. Okay. I came from an atmosphere. You're probably having a hard time with that. My original involvement in pottery really was atmospheric firings and doing soda firings. And it was about the community involved around doing a firing that took 2-3 days, or making pots real late at night because we're trying to fill a giant kiln that we're going to fire this coming weekend. And that's really kind of what got me hooked. And when I finally made my way to Florida and spent some time, really kind of made a residency here, I was kind of lost. I didn't know what to do. If I'm going to get back into pottery now, I got to figure out, I don't have a property that I could build this giant salt kiln or soda kiln on. So I started pushing myself and say, hey, can I get glazy effects of movement, or can I emulate this atmospheric look with some of the glazes, like the iron lusters and the irons and with oxides, and using texture to maybe get movement on glazes and kind of get a look that was more atmospheric look. So I spent a lot of time there before I got into saying, oh, well, what can color do? Like, do I like color? And kind of, so now I kind of, with the transfers I use and I'm kind of come around a little bit with liking color.
You've blown my mind. And I think this is what's fascinating about these conversations too, because anybody who has seen your work in the last, I'm going to say year, 2 years, would never imagine you without color.
Yeah, I mean, looking at my booth now, it's a big difference. It definitely, people come to my booth now and they rave because it kind of morphed to that. People were starting to rave about the little bits of color I was adding. And I'm like, really? And I wanted to understand what their feeling was. And maybe I wasn't seeing something that other people see. So that was kind of where the breakthrough was. I often, you like what you like sometimes, but sometimes you don't like, you'll never know unless you taste something, right? It's like food. You're never going to know if you fall in love with the food that you're going to love more than the food you've previously loved. And when I started looking at other people's work, I'd ask them about why they would use the color the way they do and what it means and how does it translate and how I see things and how it accentuates, I guess, the form, and how it could accentuate texture, and with glazes running into the grooves to make the glaze darker and lighter on the surface, and the depth it can provide. That kind of was a whole new, almost opened up a can of worms. I don't know if I'm ready to fully develop, but because I don't want to, it almost is too much. I'm backing off a tiny bit with the transfers, and I need to get back to some of the things I feel that are real super important to me.
So when did you go from, was it the move to Florida that was kind of the impetus from wheel thrown to hand building?
Initially, I was a thrower when I first came to Florida, but then I started realizing that, I really kind of like platters and plates, and starting to like make, early in my learning skills, I was like making big platters, I wasn't super skilled at it. I was able to figure it out, but not at this speed that I thought I needed to be at to be making a decent side hustle with it. And initially for only since the last maybe 5 years I was doing my career in corporate world. And then I said, look, now I need to start thinking about how do I make product a little quicker and use some of the techniques that I know I'm capable of using, and to apply texture. A lot of times on a wheel, it's hard to apply texture to a pot when it's on the wheel. So from that standpoint, I wanted to go and do things in the flat. So I started doing a lot of forming on forms. I spent a lot of time at the Goodwill digging out forms that people were giving away, and finding ways to lay and drape into mainly slump molds. Really didn't get into the hump mold thing for quite a while. until like some of the forums again, like GR Pottery Jeff that does his forums, and Sharon Hoppy and some of those other ones. I mean, I have forums all over the place, but now to the point where I got so many different things. What form am I going to use today? Now, so you get back into that mode of it's almost too much, needing to stay a little bit more focused and find. I'm one of those potters that likes to make a lot of different things all the time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with having an identity that's an explorative identity where you're, maybe going in different directions that may be untamed to some extent or may not seem to have a purpose initially, but finding things that you love. And, hopefully there's an audience out there, a customer out there that wants it, because I'm certainly enjoying the hell out of what I'm making. So I'm getting that fulfillment. That's money in the bank to me already. Whether someone is going to want to own it for themselves and get that same kind of enjoyment or reflect from that, and what my intention is another thing.
You mentioned your time with corporate and that this was just kind of a recent transition full-time wise. And this was one of the questions that one of our community members submitted, which Mary was asking. Mary said she's always been curious about your transition from the previous career in engineering into ceramics.
Yeah, I think it kind of was a couple of times it was undesired where I was in a job where either my position was kind of just dissolved or a lot of the quality work I did is I built quality systems for manufacturing companies. So when the quality system was working at its peak, I developed it. It's working and chiming. We have regulatory compliance. Everything's going great. Now this big salary they're giving me is, okay, the system can work by itself. I didn't necessarily need to monitor it. You can have the quality coordinators and down-level supporters run it. So all of a sudden, before you know it, these corporations would, just displace the managerial roles a lot of times or shift you out or made it difficult.
You made yourself redundant.
Basically. And it happened. It didn't initially. I'm like, well, maybe this is a fluke. Well, after like the fourth or fifth time this happened, and I spent, 8-10 years at a couple of different companies, and I made myself valuable in other ways because every time I shifted jobs, I'm like, I got to do it differently. Otherwise, I'm going to get the same result. I'm not insane. I'm not going to repeat, right? And so at that point, I tried a few different things to become valuable. But ultimately, this last job I was at, this corporate, they got taken over, and it became really the loyalty and the trust to their employees. It was, corporate America got into such a way that I got my feelings hurt finally for the last time. And I said, enough of this. I'm going to take all of this energy and all of this insight of knowledge of how to run quality and how to run manufacturing, how to do all these different skills. I'm going to use it for myself. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm older now. If I get a good 20-year run on developing something that I love and I'm going to enjoy for 20 years, I want to take the time now. I don't want to wait till I'm super ready for retirement and then now I'm going to do pottery as a full-time. Once COVID hit and jobs kind of went sideways, I said, look, I'm all in. I'm done with this corporate nonsense. I'll take every bit of the money I tucked away. My mom passed, left me a couple bucks. And so it was like, I'm going to use this money for really moving myself to the next level with my art and really showing appreciation for it. And I may not make a bunch of money, but I want to do things other than making money. I want to shine light on others. I want to shine light on the things other people are doing for ceramics because it did so much for me. I think with Pearl Jam and pottery, it saved my life. Otherwise, I don't, all these depressing modes, I always went back to music and clay. And so if that's out there for other people to hear and to understand and to know that there's an outlet out there, it's almost like self-counseling in a way. I mean, you can find things where you meet and commune with others. And it's such a, thankful to you that you created such a beautiful community. And for us to get together and rally behind and say, this is something that is not just hey, we're just going to hang out for, a couple months. You have a quick membership, you're over. This is like, I consider this a lifelong thing. And, you can move to Italy all you want, but you're still going to have Wi-Fi and internet. I want to see Francesco in his element when he's out there, So this is one of those things that, I'm in for the haul. You know what I mean?
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. I also think Florida might be our most represented state of community members.
Yeah, the most, I think there's maybe like 5 or 6 of us now, at least.
Like 4 at least immediately to the top of my head.
For years, Florida was the hotbed for festivals, art festivals. because of the weather being warm for the most time of year. I mean, California too has its share, but Florida, as far as promoters and really targeting, and I don't want to say targeting because it almost has negative connotation, but looking to provide artwork to a target market, which is the older people who are settling down with new homes to retire, to decorate their beautiful retirement forever homes. And it was a market that was thriving for, it still thrives, but, was crazy thriving for many, many years.
That's really interesting because the thing I hear here, talk about synonyms, what we hear a lot in shows up here are people saying, "Oh, I love this, but I'm downsizing." So it was almost like retirement kind of was a conflict of interest to selling something to somebody because they were saying, "I'm trying to get rid of things instead of have more things." And the audience that you have in Florida are people now with maybe they're moving into an apartment instead of a house, but it's a secondary place, and so now they are actually making purchases.
A lot of people that buy a lot of stuff for me is people getting new things, not didn't have the opportunity to have certain things when they were in the hustle and bustle and they were shifting house from here to there, and they lost a lot of their stuff in transits of going from place to place. And now it's time, okay, I'm settling down, or I just want to redecorate or whatever. I don't do as many live shows. I used to do 8, 10, 20, 15, 20 a year. Now I'm down to a handful. I just want to really kind of focus on the market that I like and make it more comfortable for me, not get chaotic about the whole thing.
Yeah. I feel like we were having this conversation the other day about markets and people like yourself in the community who have a lot more experience with them and people who have just in the last week done their first market ever. And I feel like the thread I keep hearing from people who have more experience have said, you kind of have to go through a chunk of time to do a bunch of them and figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, where your audience actually exists in these shows. But then also, and correct me if I'm wrong, from my experience right now with our markets, it seems like it's kind of like a phase of business where like as you're trying to grow, you're doing markets to get yourself in front of as many people as quickly as you can. But there's a natural kind of phasing back down of like, okay, now we did the 21 year and now we know which ones are good for us, are a good fit. We're going to do 10 the next year, or we're going to do 5 the year after because it's just not sustainable. Does that strike with your experience?
What is enough? When is enough, right? Yeah, the old adage, cliche, you don't know what you don't know. And as time goes on, it's like, well, can I do 2? Can I do 5? Can I do 10? Can I do back-to-back weekends? Well, the first time I did a back-to-back weekend, I went insane. My mind was just blown away, like, this is so much crazy work. And do I really want to feel like this? No amount of money at some point really added up to where the comfortableness, discomfort I had in going that route. Although a couple of times it was amazing because it got me into some kind of a groove that was like a higher level performance. And so when you could see you can do it, it's like, okay, maybe I'll try it a little bit. And to your point, you try to do as much as you possibly can, and you don't know what those limits are, right? So you really want to test the bounds. It's always good to test the bounds of discomfort, because I think you find learn the most a lot of times when you do test the bounds of discomfort, the bounds of change, of someone thrusting something on you. You lose a job or you go in a different direction that you never planned you were going to, and you discover something that's life changing. For me, couple of different times when I really excelled in my pottery and my clay journey was when I was let go from a position or I decided to leave because I wasn't happy. One was my mom had gotten sick when she was having some illnesses in Florida, and I just decided to bail on my entire career and spend time with her. And I said, look, I'll do pottery in the meantime. I'll find a local studio. I'll keep my mind strong for her to really support what she needed to be taken for her therapies and chemo and all this other stuff, that I would support myself with that clay. And I was amazed at what clay could do in those kind of modes, where you really could lean on it. And so pushing yourself real hard and then backing off, to your point, Rebecca, of finding a happy medium. I think I'm in a good place now, but I really need to ramp up my amount of stuff I make. I have really good processes, but I just need to, I just did a bunch of koi fish designs and I was surprised. I mean, I banged them out in like no time. And I was like, man, I could turn it on when I need to, but to be in that mode all the time is not easy. That's one of the things that people, but I love that part of the community where the questions came up of, I'm just doing my first market. I'm nervous as hell. What do I do? It's easy to say fake it till you make it, and it's easy to give advice of just go with it and see what happens. But it was good to see a large number of people get together. And while we had a similar theme of, everybody has to do their first show. It's gonna get better over time. Okay, these are all things that, okay, that's probably expected to say. But as you, it's so much the truth. And it's so much that when you think about, okay, what's the worst thing that could really happen? I go there and I make no sales. I have a 0 sales, but I'm going to learn a hell of a lot of things. And you're never going to have no sales. I mean, I think my worst day I sold $6. I sort of back in the day I had Bud vases that were $6. Every time we sell more than $6 at the first day of the show, we say it's not our worst show. Me and my wife always remind ourselves that, it's not our worst show. We made more than $6.
What you just said then tells me it's actually kind of important to have that one really bad one so that your bar that you have to exceed is incredibly reasonable.
Right, right. And you could look back. I mean, I often look back at how crazy I still get butterflies because one of my responses to the community member that was asking the questions was I still get nervous. And part of it is because I want the performance to be up to my standard. I hold standards to myself and I know certain things. But yet I rely on the fact that I've been doing this long enough. I know I have the knowledge and skill. And I really bank on that's money in the bank for me. You can never going to take that away from me. So when I go up against a show or I'm going to go up against a challenge of a commission or something, I know that I have something I could bank on. It's just some of the other areas that I really want to maybe I want to go over and above this time, or maybe I feel real good about what's going on and I want to, learn a little something different.
Well, and it's that constant iterating, right? I mean, I think this is the surprising factor of business maybe for some people, the exhausting factor, the importance of the group think that we have going on, because I think sometimes the expectation is when I see people ask questions about sales or about business or about any of it online, the way the questions are formed or are asked, rather, the way the questions are phrased are so often with the expectation that it's going to just be the either or, yes or no, option one or option two, when in reality, it's like, well, we need context. We need all the information and also what's going to work for you right now for your first show ever is probably not going to be what you're going to do for your 10th show once and to your point of talking about
Yeah.
it being a lifetime commitment, I love that just emotionally, but from a business standpoint, it's very realistic in terms of we're all constantly kind of iterating and changing and improving and then learning more and improving again, just like we do with the craft, right?
Yeah, you don't, they're not creating things that aren't there. Sometimes we have a tendency when we get hyped up about or anxiety about something, you create something that's not there in your mind. So you're thinking, oh my God, it's going to be a failure. People are going to hate my work. You create something that there's no information that shows that this could potentially be the case. So that's again back to the earlier conversation we had about data and collecting data. If you were to look at 10, 20 shows of potters that for the very first time they're going out to do their first show, I guarantee you none of them had an experience where people said, your work's horrible, get out of here. Because at some point for you to commit to doing a show and having the passion behind it, there's something already there. There's something nurturing in the soul of a person that really wants to go and express themselves through clay. And it could be that, I see all sorts of pots on, when I look, a lot of times I'll look at who my followers are and what level they're at and what they would be interested in seeing from me. And a lot of times in the beginning, it could be just some basic stuff or mentioning some basic things, or, I'll get a lot of questions sometimes where I want to answer in a very rudimentary step one type of answer versus, being capable as an engineer to go super analytical with nonsense where, over many, many years, I've been criticized for many, many years about, don't speak down to me, speak at my level. And that doesn't always come easy. And it's important when you're at like art shows and to, people are asking about your work is to understand what their knowledge base is. What do they, do they have no knowledge of clay at all? And it's amazing how, and we go in circles with this all the time when we talk about some of the comments that get made on some of these Facebook groups and some of these other groups that people right away lean towards something with no information. and or make a comment about something with not even having the context, like you had mentioned a couple minutes ago, of putting it in the right place. And what are we looking at here? What are you trying to do here? But it almost seems like you want, the first to the answer is going to win some award. And that's not the case. And a lot of times I'll be very apprehensive to chime in on groups when I see it going sideways. And there are a few people that I really love when they take the time to put a nice chunk in there to tell how it is. That's always a fun thing.
Yeah, because that's what I was seeing online is people give these answers that are really definitive. Like it's like this is the truth. And it's like, well, maybe. I mean, I was reminded just the other day of the fact that somebody was actually, it was Allie, who was Allie Mason, who's the Instagram strategist, was saying, I can find a case study of every possible option out there, right? There is somebody out there who they're making reels every single day and getting whatever kind of success rate with that. And then there's somebody else who's, they're bombing for them. And that's because each of us have different audiences, different needs, different different kind of steps in the business journey, like the age of your business, then that also creates a different need. There are no definitive answers really, except like, yes, please have a separate bank account for your business than your personal.
Hey, there are a few things that is a good heads up, but there is no real right answer. This sometimes that's thrown around a little too loosely, but there is a process by which you can make things easier, right? You can simplify it for yourself. If you're compressing your slabs, you're going to have fewer cracks, or okay, then there's the whole theory of is it really needed? Is it the air bubble that explodes the piece, or is it the slow drying? If you leave air bubbles in there, you're probably setting yourself up for something, okay? There are certain things that I have found that I'm going to put some of these extra steps in there. Sometimes even it just makes me feel good, even though it's wasteful. And I'm all about lean operation. I took all these million lean courses on how to lean a business and, these Ishikawa and these Japanese techniques on how the automotive industry destroyed the American industry, automotive, by going lean and efficient and having all this crazy stuff. And I learned all these skills and I said, okay, you can be super lean about things, but sometimes it's not enjoyable. I mean, unless you're making cars, unless you're trying to push a profit, unless you really have, well, if the intention is to do that, like I said earlier, you need to know what the intention is. And for me, making and doing some of these fussing steps on my pieces is part of the journey, and part of what I enjoy about clay is that I can futz around with it. Now, I don't want to spend too much time because it kills me, but the touching and the constant, my little mud tools, white sponge, my smoothing sponge. If I didn't have that thing, that's my number one. That and the Dolan knife. If they didn't change the design, that damn Dolan knife, they changed the design on us. But my old one.
That reminds me of a conversation Francesco and I were having about most of the people we see trying to work with restaurants, for example, are at bare minimum doing a jigger and jolly or something like that. And, he's over here still just, it's literally by hand. There's no formers, there's no molds, there's nothing. It's all just by hand. And I was kind of like, is this going to work? Like, is this really going to, can we make this work? And he was saying like, well, that's the enjoyment for me. Like I want my hands to be touching the clay. That's the whole point. And so I have to figure out a way to make it work. And for him, that has been just like a skill accrual to be fast enough with it. But that's what that's for us is our priority then, as opposed to, I think what I'm getting at is you're kind of choosing what your thing is. And then the decisions have to fit around that so that you can have your thing, which is...
Yeah, you're not going to let go of certain things. There's certain things you're not going to let go of. And I mean, now I love porcelain. I love working with porcelain. I'm going to fuss with the porcelain if I have to. I'm going to make it work. It really, truly, this last load, I was like, I might just standardize on the damn stuff. As long as it's a porcelain that is it works well with hand milling and well with throwing, which the one I found does, the Laguna one I'm using does. And it looks so much nicer. It's like, why am I, if I got a process that can support this, why wouldn't I use the better clay when I'm getting way better results? And there's nothing better than the beauty of a piece that's thrown versus a jigger. I'm not against these slip casters or against these jigger makers. And there's a need
I was going to say,
that.
Bill, don't get me canceled.
No, I'm not I really, one of my tops is Hammerly Ceramics, Kurt Hammerly, and what he does, because his ability to design and take something from his brain to a product in like no time at all is the epitome of having a process that's solid. And I respect the hell out of that kind of stuff. So seeing that and seeing, Sherrod from Deep Black, he's another one that, he gets a concept and the colors and how he presents the product. So I see that. And you'll find that same thing with you and Francesco of finding the clients that are going to recognize that you are throwing these. To see some of the hand marks and you can see how much that's in there. Yeah, you could jigger something and then put the swirl in. That's possible. People got on East Fork for a long time about, okay, they're making it with a machine, and then someone puts the spiral in, and is it, quote, thrown by hand? That's semantics after a while, to some extent.
Well, speaking of process, I don't want to get carried away and forget the other questions that we've got. So Melissa was curious about how you discovered using texture, which we talked a little bit in the transition, but I just wanted, in case you wanted to expand upon anything, about how Bill discovered using texture as one of his signature techniques, especially your PVC placemats. You were the first person Melissa saw using them online, and also because this needs to just be on the record, and this was the repeating thing so many people have said when I told the community we were going to be on the podcast. Quote, Bill is the nicest person on the internet. That's not a question, just a comment. And I agree.
I really appreciate that. It's sometimes hard to take compliments, but over the years, I think I've learned a little bit. I've been a little bit better at it. Okay.
I think we've started forcing you to take them.
Yeah.
In the past. I'm immediately remembering that we got you to open that. Was it
Rene Lepresti's,
Lepresti?
his mug that I have for 3 years that I sat on. I have, Rebecca from Graves Co. I bought 2 of her ice cream bowls that are still in the box. They're 4 months old and they're still in the box. I haven't used them.
You have to explain, just for people who don't know the story, you have to explain why you wait, because it's a really beautiful thing.
That's one of them. And then I also have the walking apron that I bought about 2 months ago, and it's still in the bag. I haven't tried it on yet because that was because the weather wasn't. It's not cold enough for it. Okay, I didn't want to wear it in the summer. But the delayed gratification, basically, it's delayed gratification, and it's the anticipation of something. With the Rene Lepresti mug, I had in my mind what it is and what she does, and I have such a high level for her skill. Initially, I was like, I don't know if I want to open it right away because maybe when I see it, it's not going to be as unbelievable as I have it imagined in my mind.
Like meeting your heroes.
Yeah, it's like meeting your hero. Maybe I'm not wanting to see because a couple of times that's happened. I bought stuff from purchased stuff from Potters, and I looked at it and I went, maybe it didn't. The pictures looked better and had a bigger impact. Although it was still lovely, I love it. Okay, but the delaying it, and knowing something's there that I could go to when I need it. I guess it's like having that treat that you have that maybe you don't eat it and it's going to be there, but it doesn't go bad. Pottery doesn't spoil, right? So to have that ability now, usually like either on my birthday or on a holiday, like, Hanukkah and Christmas is coming. So I'm going to probably put it on the tree or whatever. And, we celebrate more Hanukkah here. So we don't have the tree, but we have the table that everything goes on. So I'll put that out there and that'll be my little extra gift, And so I try to make it to where it really can give its full impact at the time that I think it will. And I try not to overthink it. But when I need it, when I'm in a bad mood or a downer, I need that, I go to it.
Well, I will say, I think, and just to give context with Rene Lepresti mug that you opened, you had just offhandedly, we've got some of these hangouts online in the community where sometimes there's a theme, sometimes there's not, or we're just chatting and hanging and co-working or what have you. And you had just offhandedly mentioned that you had this mug still in the box for a year?
It was about 3 years, almost 3 years.
3 years. And this was at least a year ago, if not 2 years ago. It was early days. It was about a year ago. And you mentioned this, and we all are just like, oh my gosh, you have to open it. And you had explained this idea of delayed gratification and this moment. And it was a really emotionally heavy moment that when you open that box, I know I am not the only person, and I'm going to admit this publicly. Multiple of us were holding back tears. We were choked up and crying. And it was in that moment that I was like, we've got something really special going on here. Because to see you open that also was just like, there is no unboxing video that will ever be that good.
I'll sit in the front room sometimes watching. Like I said, I'm big on dance shows and music shows. I'll sit in the front room sometimes. My wife likes to watch in the kitchen sometimes and play games on her computer. But I'll sit in there and I'll be sitting crying, like tears will be coming down my eyes. And my wife's going, "What are you crying about now?" And it's like, look, somebody did a performance, the performance they just did, and what it takes to perform at a level. And I get moved by that emotionally. I'm very in tap with my emotions that way. And that's a lot of times what carries how I create is I really tap into my ability of feeling what I'm doing and how it moves me. And I think that's super important for people to kind of think about that, what really impacts them and how they get moved by it. I want to answer the question about the placemat and the texture. Okay, let's circle back.
Textures. That was the whole point.
But mainly the placemat. I'm not really the first one that I think used the placemat. I probably saw it somewhere. It was really a necessity thing, okay? So for the longest time, I saw people using plaster, okay? They would use sheets of plaster and they would cut and carve into it. Linoleum was another example. Or, like people taking texture from like trees or wood or, and so when I started seeing that here is this inexpensive plastic, not a super fan of plastic, but there is a purpose. Again, I could draw myself to using something if I find intention for it. And so I found a couple of these import stores that had them for very inexpensive. And I saw all these different designs. I'm like, man, that's going to look great in clay. I mean, my engineering mind takes over and looks at the process of what I want to do. And placemats are large. You can get big ones, you can get long runners. So really, it's the bill on using, it was an uninterrupted texture. So it's large enough to where I could do a big drop bowl, a flutter bowl, or whatever Melissa does, what she calls a fluttering bowl. And so I would do these deep dish slump molds and have that, constant texture without having to, mess around with it. And really got into the stamps, making my own stamps. I'm a big fan of Sarah Pike and, creating your own stamps, your own rollers. I have a couple of companies I use that make great rollers. They're just how I apply them on my rim, and especially what I've been doing with this diamond texture on my rims. People have been, and it's just to accentuate a little something different. It actually gives you a better grip on the piece. So there is functionality there. When you grab the piece, it flares, it almost caps out the, people look at it and go, wow, how thick is your slab? Well, you're compressing the slab with the roller, and you're going over and you're creating a diamond pattern in there. And then the glaze can catch inside of it and create a visual, as well as it flares it a little bit. So when you grab onto it with your finger, you're actually feeling that little bit of flare and its functionality to it. So there's a lot of things with that. I think, or search, that was Melissa's question. What was Mary had a couple questions. Mary had a secondary question about the flipperoonie, like my famous flipperoonie. So I got to talk about that for a quick second, because that's one of it's suddenly starting to catch on, which I'm excited about. But it's not just a dopey thing. Flipperoonie basically means to flip your pot or to do a task by rotating something, okay? And I coined the term flipperoonie because it's flip and I put a rooney on it, and part of it is ergonomics. So part of it is you're reaching out in front of you and you're holding your piece and you could easily rotate it with less amount of energy required, and it's ergonomic. You're not lifting above your head. You're not doing crazy motion. Two, it provides lower stress on your clay, because if you're not handling your clay as much, you're not putting that memory in there of being moved or being torqued around where it doesn't need to be, okay? And I see a lot of people pick up slabs a lot of times and they're waving the slab in the air and then they're dropping it over a hump mold. Now, okay, if you're hump molding it and then you're going to smooth it out and compress and stuff, okay, the memory is kind of, is a moot point, so to speak. But the flipperoonie was a good one. It kind of catches on and makes you think that maybe I need to do it here. And it's a fun thing to say. Everybody's been really kind of saying they love saying flipperoonie. It's time I even have GR Pottery Jeff did it one day on his live when he was doing he's like, a live guy who's going to do his flipperoonie. And so it's cool that it caught on. I need to make some merch. I don't know if I'd sell the merch as much as I would wear it or whatever, but maybe with the spiraling, my hands or something. I don't know. That was a fun thing that came about, because it's in most of my videos when I show my process. It's in there once or twice. I think I did one where there was 4 flipperoonies in one video.
I was going to say, we need a best of flipperoonie audio so that it's just, we need just oh my gosh, what was the song? The Percolator in like the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
I want to dub over you saying flipperoonie with that music as like a popular pottery audio for social media would just be
Yeah, it's so
hilarious.
easy to do. When you get good at it, it's so easy to do. I've been trying to pass it on a little more. I don't like to see when people lift towards them and they're doing this very awkward movement. And when, as people get older, I mean, there's a lot of older potters out there. And, most of my following is, 55 to 65 women. So if they're the ones that are doing these movements and stuff, I certainly don't want people, taking away having to do some crazy movement that's going to jack their shoulder up. So I wanted to incorporate something that's fun to do. You can do it at any age, obviously, but some people have been mean to me on social media. Like, hey, you're just flipping a pot. What the heck? And I'm like, whatever, dude. I have no time for that kind of nonsense. You're either on board or you're not. You know what I mean?
Also, we gotta not take ourselves so seriously all the time. If the internet was only full of very serious, it is full of very serious things. So you need some levity. You need some fun. Why
Yeah.
not?
Oh, no doubt. That's absolutely the truth. I can tell you that much.
Well, the other question that we haven't gotten to yet, that is the big one, that I don't know that, this might fall in the realm of accepting compliments, but Jessica wanted to know what advice you have for people who want to attempt to be as supportive and encouraging to other makers as you are.
Oh, that's a real good one. I think that it does take energy to do that. So I think you have to commit to wanting to provide that to people. I mean, I use the word altruistic. I learned it. I don't even know how to spell it really, barely know how to say it. But I learned from somebody what that meant years ago, probably 20 years ago. And really, basically, it's selfishness and wanting to do more, living life for others versus yourself. And part of that is too that indirectly it's gonna come back in the world. I see it as a pay it forward type thing where you're gonna get it back to some extent. So to have your mind around part of that, of like, why do I do this? I'm absolutely 100% don't do it for lip service. I don't do it to just, I'm going to make someone feel happy. Let me come up with some saying. Because you could definitely see the heartfeltness in the comments. And I actually agonize over some of it. Like I spent a bunch of time thinking on, how many times can you say something good about somebody, about their piece of pottery? And do we always use the same words? Wonderful, beautiful, stunning, fantastic. Okay, so then those words start becoming meaningless. So really it becomes, for advice to be given, it's there's something in what you're seeing to express what you're really seeing in it. It's lovely, but there's something more than just lovely. I mean, is it the color? Is it the shape? Is it something that makes you think of something? So to tell a person that it invoked a memory of, like got into doing doilies and I saw someone doing a doily demonstration. It made me think of my grandmother. And I sat here like, again, I was in and started to cry. And I'm thinking, man, it looks just like my grandmother when I used to go over and sit and she used to do her word puzzles and we'd talk. And she had these doilies sitting on like the armrest because she was worried about when the kids came over, they're going to jack everything up. And she would take them and she'd wash them, but she would have them over her couch area where everybody sat. And it really, that's why I got into doing those doilies for a little while. And I think I did a video of it being an impactful thing. But it's to express to someone is that you may not know what they're trying to show, but you could tell them what you're seeing. And far too much we live life where we're telling someone about the things that are not good, about what they're doing wrong, about how they fall short, about how you're disappointed about something. Until we start to turn each and every person around to where we're complimenting each other, even if it really digs down to where you have to stifle maybe something that you initially thought of, like, no, what's the big deal with this? But there is a big deal. I mean, it means something to the person. It means something. So that's kind of where it started, with really wanting to be outwardly outspoken with it. And I enjoy it. There's nothing better than looking at something and expressing what I see. And hopefully the person cares enough about who I am to take that advice or take that compliment or comment and understand what I'm trying to tell them. And I've gotten pretty decent at it now. I mean, I'm like, it's not like, okay, yeah, I got this skill, I'm going to sell it to somebody. It's true. It's a true thing that is like, oh my God, how do I guess I was like this maybe most of my life, but I always had this hard exterior. I came from New York. New York is like, you don't get huggy and you don't express your feelings. Just like, get the hell out of my way. I'm a New Yorker. I'm going to blow the door down. You don't need the whole door open for me.
I was gonna say, I want to hear you in your like full New Yorker accent because I bet it's in you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee and who's your boss? You know what I mean? Here's a cup of boss coffee, soda, I used to say pop in upstate New York, but you get exposed to things with most of your life. A lot of it was always the tough love, like I said earlier, and to express to somebody something nice. I never heard it when I was growing up, almost never. Then when I went to California and was actually friends with some people that had super solid family structure, like really loving and like they would compliment each other and, oh, you got good grades. And yeah, okay, I got a little gift for a good grade or attaboy or something. But it was like deeper and it was like a heavy psychological kind of message about, and it really drove these kids to a new level. And I'm saying to myself, man, there's probably a lot of people out there making pots that never hear things that are positive that really want to make them continue with what they're doing, to continue the exploration or to continue sharing. I mean, a lot of times people won't share because they had one or two bad experiences, or they share and they get no likes at all. Nobody cares. I got 5 likes. I'm do this no more. But maybe if they get 1 or 2 likes from somebody who maybe knows a few things, I'll throw the 14 years that you throw around with your photography, my 30 years of being exposed to clay. I've seen my fair share of folk potters and different artists, anywhere from Tom Coleman's to Ah Leon doing the Yixing teapots, to where, okay, I mean, I'm not the greed and I don't have the thing, but I might have something to say. So I really appreciate that when people recognize that it fills me up. And I love getting the messages back. I love when I get a little something, because I pay the attention to them, they pay attention to me. Amy from Pine Zen, Amy Brumman is just she's such a wonderful friend. God, when we go back and forth with each other because it's truly meaningful for us. Yeah, and she sees it, I see it, and she's got the right approach too. She takes it very, very true too. So I think it's important.
I also think there's something different. Not that the kind words we hear from whoever aren't helpful to hear and don't encourage us, but there's something a lot different to hear from a colleague. To hear from somebody who also makes pots, who knows what they're doing, to say, hey, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. And even some of the encouragement you've given me, which has nothing to do with making pots, but is like, just to really know another person sees you. It's some powerful freaking stuff. So yeah, and you can't fake that.
It could be a game changer on when you decide to stay with something or how far you'll push because you're doing it for reasons other than maybe the bottom line, which a lot of times is boring and big deal. You make a bunch of pots they don't sell, but my old adage is that's money in the bank. You may have a whole crap load of bins filled with pots, which I do for my shows, but that's cash in the bank. That to me, that's like no different than having money in an account that I don't use. At some point, those pots are going to go. Whether I have to have a flea market sale on the corner, holding up a sign. But I'll never do that. I'll find ways to sell it. But I don't get too stressed with, I didn't make a ton of stuff for the holiday and I'm going to, getting crazy with making myself uncomfortable. And, I got an order for 30 Christmas trees. Now what am I going to do? Sometimes when you wish for something, and then you get it and it's like, what?
Yep.
That's why I'm definitely part of the I don't take commissions unless it's something that really moves me. I mean, there's people approach me and they say, "Oh, can you do it?" And I flat out look, I just don't do it. But if it's someone that's close to me and really makes the case of they want something that I make and there's a reason behind it, I so often will jump on the bandwagon of it and take care of it and do it, And I'll spend tons of extra time doing for others because I know really the people that have done for me, all the time that they spend for me, they pay it forward thing again.
Well, and also I feel like not to go down the rabbit hole of commissions, but the nature of saying just point blank, no, I don't take any at all, like no conversation, is so like how we each define what a commission is so different, right? Like, does that mean, okay, no, I'm not going to say yes to a one off of an item I've never made, I never plan to make again, like a bacon maker. I'm not going to come full circle with it, I'm not going to make one, right? But someone comes to us and says, hey, can I commission you for 20 of the snack bowls that you make? Okay, well, that's still a commission because it's an order specific to them of something we don't have yet. But it's the thing that it's something we want to make more of, or maybe actually, here's a better example. One of the restaurants we work with was talking about everybody right now is making contremar fish. It's a real big, it's the whole fish on a plate. It's kind of like butterflied open. So you need an oval platter, we've never made anything oval because we just wheel throw. We don't dart anything or whatever. So all of a sudden, we are presented with the opportunity to like work with somebody we've already worked with before that we enjoy. It's an item we've never made, but maybe there's some interest in there to see like, hey, should we do this on the wheel and then dart it? Should we make it with a slab? And that's, if we just point blank said, no, we don't take any commissions, that conversation never happens. So it's kind of like, know what your own boundaries are, but you don't have to publicize them.
Yeah, I hear your dilemma there with somebody asking to do something that maybe you're not proficient in. Don't be afraid to push Francesco into the discomfort of hand building, right? Until I got to the point of where I'm like, well, what is this? And do I get the same kind of a fun feel from it? Do I get the same, like, wow? I was surprised. It actually has taken over where when I do get back on the wheel, I love it. And I've really neglected throwing for so long. Like I was making crazy good stuff on the wheel. I mean, like big.
I've never seen you at the reel. This is my formal request. The next Aliveguy reel. I've never seen you at the wheel.
Yeah, there's a couple there's a few in there deep on my Instagram page, there's a few buried. But I mean, I'm good at making mugs. I'm good at, I've done bowls and I did a soup tureen one time. I was a big fan of Robin Hopper when he was alive, and he put out a bunch of videos on throwing big and demystifying the big and how you need to be strong to do big stuff. And and I think it was Sandra too. She did a workshop recently with Sephora on how to throw in multiple pieces, but using a slab, starting with maybe a one piece and then throwing another piece together. I don't think she used a slab, but she drew them in sections. So she broke it down, which was interesting to see, but it wouldn't be oval like to what your need is. But yeah, that's the thing when you push into areas maybe again that you don't feel comfortable with, you discover something that you may fall in love with. It's like, had you start pottery to start with, right? It had to be something that drove you to, like it doesn't land on your head. But then when it does, man, holy cow. I mean, how many stories do we hear of like it took over their life? It certainly has taken over my life. I could tell you that much.
Well, speaking of which, just my own curiosity, getting back to Mary's question of the career transition, how did you learn? Like, did you start going to a community studio then between wheel throwing and hand building? I know you're big on watching everybody online and stuff, but that for me,
the hand building came naturally just from learning how to. It wasn't so much engineering as using my hands for things. I've always been good with my hands. That being an art, I had the art pedigree, if you want to call it that. I was always a decent drawer. I always did fine line type stuff, and when I make a birthday card, I put crazy happy birthday outlines and colors and whatever. So when I wanted to start doing some things that I felt were faster, and like I can't really make a giant oval bowl, right, or a deep dish bowl on the wheel. I could throw a big and alter, cut the piece, dart it in the center, right, cut the piece out, and go that route. But wouldn't it be super easy to just roll a slab and slump it and then make a fancy rim and then maybe put a foot or not put a foot? And the process really drove me to saying, okay, if I'm going to make this style of work that I'm starting to really enjoy, because it would really show off the textures I wanted to show, because I was limited on the texture I could add on a wheel, then I need to find another process that would work. And so I started slow. I mean, just like with anybody learning to do something they're unfamiliar with, is really just try. Get your hands dirty. Try it. I mean, you learn by failure, right? To fake it till you make it again. But definitely rely on what information is out there, because there's tons of information available. And people sometimes overlook that. They don't want to feel like they're copying someone, but to be influenced by someone and to see how they're doing it. And no two people are going to make the same thing anyway, no matter what you're talking about. It could look the same, but just to try it. And you're going to find your own voice with what your clay is going to be anyway over time. I mean, as much as I could put mine up against a couple of people, I mean, I could see differences in mine than somebody else's. Somebody else will have something beauty that I don't have in mine. That, do I want to incorporate that? Or there's maybe some facet of it, more of a refine. I'm about refining my look and about really being very particular about marks and glaze defects. I'm crazy. I'm almost like Melissa had that big thing about perfectionist. She did a bunch of reels on being a perfectionist. And I think I graduated summa cum laude on perfectionism type of stuff. And it's like, not that I could achieve it, but that I just have the mind of wanting to be there. And it's because I could recognize quality. When you're a trained quality manager for many years, you can see things other people don't see before they come. risk coming down the road, I can see them more because they've trained my skills to, and my, it's like having a knee jerk. I see something coming. I'm no damn straight. I got to brace up.
That's a really interesting point, especially with now transitioning into being self employed, because on the one hand, somebody might hear that and think that that's an asset, right? Of like, if you can see risk coming down the road, you can prepare and whatnot. And I feel that a little way about myself, but I also feel like sometimes that takes over. And all I'm doing is seeing the risk and the ways in which something can go wrong instead of either embracing what's going right and focusing on what's going right and, from a gratitude standpoint and all of those things, or believing in like, okay, I can see these risks down the road. I'm going to keep on keeping on, and if and when they come, then we'll deal with them, and then we'll be prepared.
I mean, that's a good approach. The awareness that they're there is the important part of it, okay? Or to have it on the table, have it on the page. When I do problem solving and problem analysis or getting into a process that I'm unfamiliar with, I'll evaluate potential risks, or I'll look at and basically, it's a well-developed, maybe corporate I don't want to say just corporate, but just a manufacturing technique where you're managing risk. What are some of the things that I may come up against? Okay, I may mix the glaze wrong. And so you can mitigate. They use the term mitigation. Okay, where you're going to get rid of some of these risk factors from being so high by adding something there. Like, you have a particular recipe you use for a glaze. You know that you have a good scale. You know that you know how to mix it. You may do testing first, so you're going to mitigate the potential for putting it on a pot before it fails. The risk is there. You're not getting upset with it. You're not flinching and bowing down to it, but you're just knowing it's on the page. To have that available there to say, okay, these are the things I may come up against. I may go to a show and, I may come up with a couple of people that are going to just be downers. Debbie Downer, going to come into my booth and be like, my grandkid could make that. I'll just have her make me one. Who needs your $50 mug? I don't need one that nice. All I drink is coffee in the morning, whatever. These things could come. I mean, obviously, if you haven't done them before, you may not know that. But over time, these are the things you add to the list. And I know I'm going to have a certain amount of people that I'm just going to laugh at. And then there'll be some people that move me beyond, like they get crazy. They go overboard. They camp out in my booth I had one person like an hour looking for a bud vase. And I realized that I got to not put as many out because I give them so many choices that like, I can't decide.
That happened to us.
And I put them in this paralysis of, they're not knowing what to do.
That happened to us with $30 bud vases. I was like, I mean, okay, $30 isn't nothing, but you're also not exactly investing in, I don't know, international stocks or something.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to take a trip or something and you know that it may be cold or the weather may change, you throw a coat in the back. Same thing if you're going to go up against something that may be risk involved. You have some kind of a mitigating action that you could take that it's not going to really be, it's not going to be super impactful for you to come up against that risk, right? I mean, there are times when, like with weather, I mean, we get crazy weather in Florida sometimes with the wind. And when I go to a show and it gets windy, I'm out of my head. My mind just because with these hurricanes that we've had over the years, I just have now like this PTSD about hurricanes and wind. So whenever we're going to do a show, the whole lead up is, what's the weather going to be like? Is it going to be windy? What can I put it? How much can I, my tent, my weights, and I get in my mind. And over the years, it's like I've done so many and I know exactly what wind is going to cause me the problem. Once you get to 14, 15 miles an hour, that's when stuff wants to lift off. And so I actually will look at the weather report and I know, and I don't have a windsock on my tent or anything, but it comes down to almost like so what do you say? You throw the grass up like Tiger Woods when he's hitting a golf shot, right? To see how much wind is moving, whether I'm gonna put stuff down or, don't put big tall flowers in a small bud vase because the wind catches the top. Now my engineering degree comes in where it's going to have a different moment of being flopped over. The center of gravity is different, so it'll go down. So I'll still even use the engineering when I need to.
Why do you think our walls are slatted?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, aesthetically, we like the look of it, but also the Midwest, the weather's unpredictable. Like, we stand there, people are amazed when we've had some windy shows or inclement weather, and we're standing around not all that worried, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, and because we know everything's kind of front, it's designed in a way to be
Yeah,
safe.
you got a Sherman tank set up there. That's a pretty heavy duty setup. I like it. You get tired of carrying that thing around.
Oh god, it's a pain. I mean, it looks lovely when it's all set up and it gives us a certain level of confidence going into a show knowing, okay, our booth looks a little bit different than what everybody else's does, and so that helps for your own mind, right? But yeah, it's a pain.
Keeping things simple is good though too. I mean, keeping it to where it's not super complicated. It has its functionality. Again, back to what we were talking about earlier, having the specific intention for things. Make it splats for the win. You keep it to where it's a look one, it's different than other people, which it stands out. And you can make adjustments to how your sales are all set up. And that's invaluable. I mean, that's how my setup is, where I have all these different stands that, and I can't find them anymore, but I can move them around. They don't make that product. It was a peg lock system where you put pegs in and it collapses. I've often thought about changing that over time because you get bored of certain setups. You almost you grow out of things sometimes. And I think I may need to change at some point.
That's interesting when you mentioned boredom. I was thinking about this the other day in a lot of the conversations that we've had as a group, that I think the surprising thing for a lot of people is how some of the business best practices and the things to kind of improve from a business standpoint or sales or quote unquote succeed, whatever that means, is boring. It's like we as artists, we want change, we want to be creative, we want to invent something new. And in reality, it's like whatever data you are tracking, not getting too into the weeds into it and going too deep, but the stuff you are paying attention to, you can't have any feedback or information if you're doing something completely new every single time. Like you do have to kind of keep some things the same for a long enough period of time.
Spending time with something to see whether you get a good emotional feel from it. Doing it once sometimes doesn't tell you. You got to do it a couple times, and whether or not it sets in and whether I like it. It's like taking up a sport. You don't just take one,
Mhm.
you go to the field one day and that's it. So let's at least take a small, it's same with pottery when you first started. Take a couple classes because you may stay, there may be one facet of pottery that you're going to be better at than, maybe it's not wheel throw, maybe it's hand building, maybe it's pinch pots. Maybe you'll fall in love with just pinch potting.
Well, and it's one of those things. I think anybody, if they think about it in terms of learning their craft, it's going to make sense because there's that arc of, when you very first start, it's exciting, it's new, you know nothing about it, and it's amazing. And then as you continue, it gets hard because with craft, like music, pottery, anything, there is that delayed gratification of like, you got to work at it to get good at it first, right? So there's this period of time where everything just kind of sucks because you know more than you did in the beginning, but your skills aren't yet there to match what you now know. And then if you stick with it long enough, you can push past that and actually get some traction. If it's business, you're getting traction, you're getting results. If it's the craft or the art, you're creating what's in your head because your hands have caught up, right?
Yeah, this is a great. There's nothing like the present though for being a new potter, because the amount of information that's available online is just astronomical. To be able to follow, and it's probably almost not good in some ways. It's overwhelming, but if you can discern between what you see and what you may want to try, or you're exposed to seeing things that you may not ever been exposed to be able to see as capable. There's times I watch potters do things that I was like, wow, I was like so close to trying that and never even got there. And this person did, and it's like huge. And I'm like, well, wow, I want to try that. I want to try photopolymer plates that I'm going to now expose and water etch. And, now I got this crazy texture that's used for printing, the old school printing presses. And now you could use for clay. And I found Jonah at Sacred Day Clay doing this wild designs. And I'm like, this is next level. So, you store all these like silk screening. I want to play around with silk screening, but you put these things in your bag and you're like, do you need to try them all right away? No. But when you do get into messing with them, give yourself a good chunk of time to kind of really get it done and do it justice. You know what I mean?
Well, I know I have to attempt to try and land this plane because you've got
Yeah, we got
dinner.
a big play. Exactly.
I do want to ask you, as somebody who does, who interacts with everybody so much online and shares so much online, for new potters out there, are there some things that you find help discern? Because, like, for example, for me, when I first started making, I didn't understand how somebody could just watch somebody on the wheel and learn what they were doing because I didn't know enough about what was going on inside the pot, with their left hand or whatever. I couldn't see it. I didn't know. And so at that, at that beginning stage, I really needed the audio teaching of somebody saying, I'm doing this now, I'm doing that, do this, do that. And so that's something I've always been amazed by with people trying to learn stuff online is like, if I'm really new, I don't know how to discern what is a good skill from a bad skill or a good habit from a helpful habit from an unhelpful habit, if you will, to take the good and bad out of it. Is there something you feel like when you're looking online, if you were a new podder, it's kind of like, okay, here's some stuff you can look out for?
Yeah, I think how I kind of filter out what I think is maybe something that's not good for me versus something that is good for me to look at is wastefulness or wasteful steps. Or, initially it's whether I'm moved to be interested. So I trust my feelings, my emotions, or what, I'm in tune to with my art to say, I'm looking at this and something about it strikes me. Okay. So whether is it the color, is it the texture, is it the technique involved in execution? That's the catcher. And then I'll decide, I don't follow someone just for the sake of following them a lot of times. I hate to be like that, but I want there to be something there that we could both mutually benefit from. And a lot of times it's one-sided. If I follow, I want to see what they're doing, or, I want to learn something from them. But maybe they may want to follow me and maybe learn something from me. But I'm real particular about looking at wasteful steps and applying a technique or a glaze or something that maybe is hitting something that I was unaware of, or something that maybe I want to explore further. I like to generate and create my content around doing actions the same all as much as the same all the time, like with the flipperoni. You guaranteed there's one in there. With how I smooth, how I handle certain portions, how I remove my forms, and have that rigid consistency of the process in there. And to be there too for people who have questions. I mean, I get quite a few questions, and while I don't spend a ton of time answering them, I do always answer them, and people are thankful for that. So, to be intentional about keeping nonsense away from it. But I mean, there is a bunch of stuff I watch, I have feelings about people who put out content for clickbait, the disaster videos and the wasting time destroying pots.
Wait, Bill, you mean all those people with those wearboards full of mugs that fall over did it on
I mean,
purpose?
and I understand the reason why. I understand the basis. It's to build following. It's to provide to, and there's something behind it. But and I know it comes from a good place. It really does. I initially had I was very upset about it. And I think a lot of people were. And I took the time to really understand what the reasoning behind it was and what the purpose behind it was. And I understand it. I mean, I fully understand portions of it. Just not, that's not my thing. And, whatever. Everybody, different strokes for different folks. And we'll use another cliche, right? But yeah, just being consistent online. I love sharing. And what I use for content is what moves me. I always post stuff. I don't try to think too much about what I want to think about what my audience wants to see. I often do things, and if it strikes me and it's something that I'm excited about seeing or doing, I have enough trust, and if it excited me, it's going to excite my followers, and that people who follow my friends and followers, they're going to trust in that I'm going to post something that is interesting. So over time, that you build that trust in the person that you're following, that their content is going to be cool. They're not going to let you down and post some nonsense. Occasionally, I might throw a few nonsensities in there, but as much as I wanted, I could be crazy goofy at times too. It's a flick of a switch and I go nutso being goofy. I try to refrain from.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, it's there. I'm going to promise to everybody that in 2025 that I'm going to get in front of the camera a little bit more, especially starting with stories. I started a little bit of that, but I want to start doing a little bit more. I don't intend to be a Florian Gadsby or whatever, but I want to do a little bit more with giving people a chance to hear it from my mouth versus trying to interpret it from just video and words. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally. Totally. I think the internet needs more Bill. I'm very excited about that. Well, I'm going to end with the biggest open-ended. Is there something that we haven't talked about that you wish people knew?
Oh, that's a good one that you wish people didn't do. Well, no, no, I mean, way to find me, Aliveguy_pottery with Instagram at Aliveguy_pottery, at Aliveguy Pottery TikTok. I have a YouTube channel that I mess around with that I've been wanting to commit to a little bit more. It's just at Aliveguy Pottery. So you could find me all over the internet pretty much by just
Yep.
Googling Aliveguy Pottery or just Bill Schwenzer. But I mean, I'm a sensitive guy, I guess, and I love the arts, and I want to live the rest of my life with kind of honing in on my clay journey and sharing it with others and really communing that whole, community feel that you've helped to provide and really make it all it can be. And I just sent my pot swap out yesterday, so I'm excited about my pot swap recipient to get their gifts. So that's another one of the things we do in the community is we share pots.
I should say we have a small pot swap compared to,
Oh yeah.
the official one, if you will, is which I'm sure you're also participating in.
Yes, I am. I sent them both. I sent them
Side
both the
note.
same day. Becca and Ryan do such a great job with that.
God, that's a huge undertaking to me.
1,000 people is a lot. I think they even do 250 international.
Yeah.
So that's a big undertaking, and we appreciate that because it brings a lot of happiness to a lot of people. So it's all part of the same cause, right? We all want to live the clay life and do it in a way where we could eat and at least have food on the table and smile most of the time. And if we could lean on each other a little bit more for some positive things and some encouragement and some loyalty and some trust with each other, I think we'll be in good shape.
I think that is a beautiful, I shouldn't have even added anything. That's just it. That's it. Mic drop. Done. And we already told people where to find you online, so we don't even have to finish with that.
Thank you for your time, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm sorry it took me this long.
Oh, no problem. I absolutely appreciate everything that you've been doing, and I'm enjoying this whole thing. I mean, I'm really starting to hit my stride with how I'm feeling about it. And the uncertainty of where I'm going has become less, and it's seeing happier faces and more involvement in the community, and people just really loving it, really seeing that what I had years ago, it's really lighting the fire in me again.
I cannot tell you how lucky I feel that Bill is one of the founding members of the community. I know I speak for so many of the members there, current and past, that the heartfelt messages of encouragement, his thoughtful deep dives into problem solving, and all-around positive nature are often the message any one of us needs to hear on a hard day. It's part of what I love about the community so much. There aren't hollow, placating responses when someone posts a dreaded kiln disaster or shares a vulnerable feeling on a rough day, or a rough week, or a rough month. And yet, at the same time, there's not preachy advice either. Simply fellow makers who actually understand that gut-wrenching feeling of an error screen on a kiln, or the nervous, anxious butterflies the night before a first market. Whether you come join us or not, my hope for every single maker listening to this podcast is to find your own colleagues and fellow makers in whatever version of community you need to celebrate with you after you make your first sale to someone you're not related to, and equally be there with you with a box of Kleenex or your favorite comfort food when things get hard. Making a living from the things we make is hard, but it's not impossible. And it is a heck of a lot more manageable with supportive colleagues and friends who understand what it is we're trying to do, journeying with us along the way. Once again, this episode was made possible thanks to all of your support. I quite literally cannot do this without you. And now, more than ever, I need your help to continue the show into 2025. Just even saying 2025 feels weird. I paused and thought about whether or not that was the right year. Anyway, if you're able, please click on over to makersplaybook.com/podcast-support to make a contribution of your choosing. Thank you so much in advance. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfan, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.